Grit for the Day. Lived experience from influencers who overcome. With CEO and founder Thomas Lee Johnson.
Of me and my family, just a little background. So my dad came from a pretty non-religious background. My mom, though, her father was like an old school Mennonite preacher.
Okay.
Last name was Yoder, Pennsylvania Dutch, and so my dad got married, moved to suburban Philadelphia. My mom grew up on a farm.
Okay.
And so total culture shock, I think for her, but for us as a family. A couple rules of the house: no shorts. All the girls wear dresses. My mom wore a head covering or a scarf.
Wow.
And we had like pygmy goats in our backyard. And we literally lived in this middle class, suburban Philadelphia neighborhood.
With goats in the backyard.
Yeah, and we were just like a total anomaly. And
oh my God.
Like no one had a grid for us. And by the way, my mom and dad had 10 kids. 10. And we were homeschooled. No TV, no sports. And so this is just a picture of, just a snapshot in time. And as you can imagine, like no one in the area had seen anything like it. They thought we were Amish. They said, yeah, that's that Amish family.
Hey, it's good to see you. Welcome to Grit for the Day podcast. I am CEO and founder of agileimmersive.com, Thomas Lee Johnson. agileimmersive.com is a transformation strategy firm where we help organizations transform into higher performing versions of themselves. In these times of shared turmoil and shared calamity, we must also share our collective wisdom and the psychological safety of belonging to the human family. Umoja ni nguvu. Unity is strength. In today's Grit for the Day episode, we talk to Nate Howell, and he's going to tell us about his grit story, where he found the grit to make bold moves. Nate is a former participant in a venture capital firm who went on to found his own go-to-market consulting firm. He has known success and has been mentored by multimillionaires and billionaires. Nate has found courage, even though in his early life, he found that he felt the need to wear a mask. He was traumatized as a child, and he was low in his self-esteem and his sense of self-worth. He's going to talk about finding the courage that allowed him to confront the reason why he was wearing a mask. He's going to talk about the truth that he learned that helped him overcome his trauma. He's going to find and identify and highlight where his self-worth comes from. Join us in a marvelous conversation with Nate Howell.
I grew into my teens because of some of the because of some of the ways that I was ostracized. I really felt like I needed to create this alter ego. So there was definitely some shame with my family. I really tried to hide that. I ended up moving from homeschool to public school in the 9th grade. And then my last 2 years of high school, I went to like a private school, a private Christian school. And so I started differentiating myself from my family to fit in, to prove myself. I didn't mention this prior, but I also had some sexual trauma in my childhood, which was really tough. That coupled with the rejection, being called Amish, being different, being homeschooled, not being able to play sports. I was trying hard, man. I was like, I'm going to go prove myself that I have worth, that I can fit in. And so it was really a next step in that iteration. It was really funny because I had this, I don't know if you remember, like back in the the late 90s, early 2000s, like Abercrombie and Fitch was the thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yeah,
and I wore all the gear and I spiked my hair up. And, and it's like people thought I was just this normal kid. When I would go home, though, I went home to this totally different environment.
What was it like? Okay, so explain to me the first time your Mennonite mom with her head covering, saw her son walk through the door, Abercrombie and Fitch, preppied out with the hair gel. What did she say?
She was, it was an evolution. But I would say that leading up to that moment, I started drinking, partying, playing the part of a very different lifestyle. And so I don't think at that point it was a surprise to her.
Okay.
I drew a pretty hard line in the sand in my teenagers that, I was going to take a different path. And so that's really what led me to California. I had some buddies that had gone to Malibu, California, to this beautiful school, Pepperdine on the beach. And I thought, man, that sounds like the paradise city. I can fully remove myself from this environment, from this stigma, and start this new life for myself. So it was really based out of fear, based out of trying to be accepted, wanting to distance myself from an identity that was really challenging as a child. And so for me, it was an escape.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what led me to California.
Wow. And so Pepperdine is has a reputation for being a school for the uber rich, the privileged.
Yeah.
How did you feel knowing your background from your family, family of 10 kids, Mennonite, Philadelphia, and being among the very, very privileged in California at Pepperdine?
Yeah, I would say at that point, I had become very good at wearing a mask, playing a part, looking a part, but internally feeling that I was a very different person.
Mm.
And so it was a very unique experience. I remember partying at one of Larry Ellison's houses on the beach in Malibu, California, and having friends that were not from millionaire families, but were from billionaire families, which was just, you can contrast that to the way I grew up. 10 kids, homeschool, goats in our backyard.
Pygmy goats.
Pygmy goats. Not, we weren't like in poverty, but we were certainly living like paycheck to paycheck. Mm. My dad supported the whole family with a small business. And so it was a huge contrast to the way that I'd grown up. And I would say that for me, I was able to sort of blend in, fit in, but I always felt different. I felt at the core that at any point I could be exposed and that I needed to prove myself. And so it was a really unique experience for me in that way. And I was able to build a great network and great group of friends, but there was a part of me that this thread of I need to try to fit in to be accepted. I need to look a certain way. I need to talk a certain way. I need to be a certain way, even if it's not who I am on the inside, and a lack, and a fear of at some point being exposed. And so that was a very weird kind of paradoxical experience. And I would say overall it was like a net positive experience, and I grew a lot. But part of that was some alcohol abuse and somewhat of a dualistic lifestyle. And so I would say as a negative undertone, one of the things that I really struggled with throughout high school and then even more so in college is an alcohol problem and a depression that would come and go. Pretty bad depression in terms of, is life, I was never suicidal, but is life worth living? Do I have what it takes? Am I lovable? And so, maybe more than you asked for, but that's a little window into some of the challenges I was experiencing in my life at that time.
Yeah. Often, I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is, but my wife, when we drive through my old neighborhood, my wife says, "Is it safe here?" Mm-hmm. That's a direct quote. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of put a nutshell around where I grew up. And then, I went to the International Baccalaureate High School, etc. So I definitely wore the mask, know how to wear it well. Became a professional actor. Wearing a mask, right?
Yeah.
I remember a moment, and so I'm setting this up for a question for you. I remember a moment where there's the dissonance between who I actually am and who I projected to the world became so stark that I surprised myself. I woke up shocked.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment when you felt, recognized, cognitively processed the dissonance?
Yeah, absolutely. That takes me to a very unique point in my college years. And so just to wrap up my career at Pepperdine, my final semester, I was living such a dualistic life in terms of partying, and I lost control. I spun out of control. And so my final semester of college, I failed a class for the first time. I ran out of money. I got my car towed and didn't have money to recover it. And I had an internship lined up with a private equity firm in Northern California, and that was my dream. I lost the internship because I failed a class for the first time ever and needed to take summer school to pass. And so that just started this cycle of negativity, and I remember just feeling at a very low. I had a flight booked home. I planned on moving back to California. And I partied so hard that night. I woke up, passed out in a house, and missed my flight. Didn't remember the night. And I just remember this moment of, man, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? Is it worth it? And so that's a point in time where it was just like an inflection and a reflection where I just decided, like, I think enough is enough. And I remember rebooking my flight back to Philadelphia and thinking to myself, I think it's over. Like, I think I'm ready for a new season. I don't like the person that I'd become, and it's time for a change. And then just an add-on to this, I go home, I leave all my stuff at a friend's house in Malibu, California. He was in commercial real estate. He was out of town for the weekend, and his house burned to the ground in the Malibu fires. So if I had any question as to whether or not I'm going to go back to California and try to reestablish this life, not only had I lost my car, this job internship I'd lined up, but now I lost all my belongings in a fire.
Oh my goodness.
And I felt that this was just a point in time where it's like, burn those ships. It's time for a change, and it's time to create a healthy lifestyle for myself. So yeah, I would say that was that moment in time for me.
That's quite an inflection. That's a dramatic and undeniable inflection point.
Yeah.
The circumstances of that fire.
Yeah.
I mean, were they questionable, or were they?
No. So this was actually Southern California is plagued with wildfires.
Oh, it was wildfire.
It was a wildfire.
Okay.
And my friend had this house that was adjacent to this mountain, and the wildfire came down the mountain and like burned the house to the ground, and with that my belongings. And so at that point, I'm out of money, don't have a car, don't have any belongings. I'm not going back.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
What was the first thought that came to your head as you landed in Philly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't remember what the first thought was when I landed, but I can tell you at that point in my life, I I really thought two things. One, I really need a safe place to rehab, because I think that at that point in my life, I was somewhat of an alcoholic, to be honest. I used to drink almost every night at that point in my life just to fall asleep. It helped pacify me. And the other thing was I just need help. Like, I need help in general. And so I decided the best and safest place for me to get that help, ironically, was back at my parents' house in this environment that I tried to escape so many years before. There's just a lot of irony in that, but that's what I ended up doing, just living at my parents' home for a couple of years, because for me it was a safe environment to find myself, if you will.
Yeah. I want to ask a more delicate question.
Sure.
You mentioned sexual trauma.
Yeah.
Can you elucidate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so maybe without going too deeply into details to protect people, probably at I don't know, somewhere between the ages of 8 and 11, I was brought into some, I would say, sexual experimentation with just broadly some family members, and that really traumatized me significantly, and that led to some pretty destructive patterns, like alcohol, like some of the sexual relationships I entered into later in my adolescence into college. And so that was another nail in the coffin in terms of just really not feeling worthy, not believing that my life had true value, and really becoming a professional actor to wear a front and to present in a way that is acceptable,
right, and
yet not feeling that internally. Yeah.
So we're back in Philly. You already made both an emotional and intellectual decision. Something needs to change.
Yeah.
I need help.
Yep.
I cannot keep living this way.
Yeah.
What was the relationship and relationships that you reached out to and that got you on a road to recovery?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say that my faith is really key for me. So I really purposed in my heart to try to get to know this God that I had been taught about growing up, and truly experience this unconditional love that I was told existed in the heart of this God. And so that was a key part of my healing, but the way that it manifested in relationships was through a few people. And one was a mentor that has become one of my closest friends, a guy named Rob, who was a successful business owner and former professional athlete, who I really looked up to. And we became friends and acquaintances, and he was someone I just felt that I needed to share some of the depths of my story with, specifically around the sexual trauma, because that was one part of my life I felt was so shameful, so hard. I needed to hide it for my whole life. No one could know about it. If they knew about it, like, there's no chance that they would love me.
Right.
Because I was broken. I felt broken. And so
yeah.
I remember sitting down at a restaurant and resolving to share my story with this guy, Rob. And I thought, I have nothing to lose if he rejects our friendship. Like, I just need to get it out. And he really listened, and it was quite the opposite. He affirmed me and was very affirming and empathetic in that, like, that's not you and that should have never happened and I'm so sorry. And through that, he continued to invest into our friendship, encourage me, inspire me, and to call out greatness in me that I didn't see in myself. And that really helped start opening my heart, because that was a part of me that was just locked up in lies and hidden, and I felt that it needed to be, a secret. And so that's the first person. I would say another person would be my now wife, Carrie. So we became good friends. And
how did you meet, Carrie?
So we met at a Christian camp in high school, and we like to joke around because I share a little bit about my past. Ironically, again, she saw me as a player and a hypocrite, because frankly, I would go to Christian camp to hook up with girls, and that's what I thought I needed at the time for validation. She would go to Christian camp to learn about God, and so we joke around and say I was a player and a hypocrite, and she was a Pharisee, and she really didn't like me. She'll tell you to this day, I did not like Nate. I thought he was cocky. I thought he was a player. I thought, I didn't want to go anywhere near him. But she will tell you she thought I was very attractive.
The player, the Pharisee.
And so that's how we met, but we weren't friends. We didn't know each other. And
Wow.
She happened to go to school in the South. She got her master's degree in marriage and family therapy.
Wow.
And she was looking for a job in the Philadelphia area. And she knew my sister, and so she stayed at my parents' house. And she knew who I was, what had nothing to do with me. But she just started coming around. She got a job in the area. She started integrating into some friend groups, and we became good friends. But that's how we met. Yeah.
That's a great story, man.
Yeah.
So you reach out. You're getting healthy. Sounds like you're getting
Yeah.
healthy in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Positive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
What choices do you make in terms of business?
Yeah.
In terms of next steps.
Yeah. So from a career perspective, I had partnered in 2 different companies. I had a very close relationship with my business partner. He happened to be my brother. I had really plowed my time and effort into growing to 2 different companies that we were partners in, and I'm talking some weeks 100-hour weeks, and but as I started to discover who I was, that I was lovable, that I was accepted, I really felt that I needed some time to just take a sabbatical, if you will, to rethink my life. And this is me in my mid-20s. And so at that point in my life, I decided to basically hand over the reins of both companies to my brother, and take some time to reflect. And I'd just gotten married. And so I gave that up actually at the time. And during that interim, I spent some time in Afghanistan, volunteering for a nonprofit there, which was really a whole nother story, but pretty life-changing, establishing my marriage, and then I went to a ministry school for a year. And so that was what I felt called to do in that season. It was a bit of a reset, and it was very timely, but that led me into a whole nother career, which is sales and scaling tech companies, and it's what I've been doing for the last close to a decade now.
So Nate, your choices are almost like whiplash inducing. It's it's like
I wouldn't recommend it.
It's like I'm gonna move from one end of the country. I'm gonna move from Philadelphia to
Yeah.
Malibu, California.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna move back.
Yeah.
I'm going to get healthy. I'm
Yeah.
going to start companies. I'm going to scale those companies. I'm then going to be bought out of those companies, and I'm going to go to Afghanistan
Yeah.
with my new wife,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do nonprofit like ministry work with
Yeah.
Afghans.
Yeah.
So, if I had to label this grit story, it's grit with transitions. Like,
Yeah.
just you have the courage to make bold transitions.
Mm.
Where do you find your courage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say first and foremost, I find my courage in the faith that I've developed with God, and I really seek to. I pray a lot, and I really seek to hear His voice for my life, and only make big decisions when I feel a peace and a confidence, regardless of what the cost is. That, along with the sage wisdom of my wife, and I've been really fortunate to have a very strong group of incredible leaders and mentors that have invested into me. And so, I mentioned Rob. There's a guy, Rick, who has invested into me, who's been a key mentor in my life. I didn't mention this, but so I went back to California, so Afghanistan back to California, and so I spent a few years back on the West Coast after ministry school. I got into a go-to-market company that specializes in scaling tech companies, and the CEO and founder of that company, Rick, has become a great friend and mentor, and almost a father figure to me in many ways. And so I've been really privileged and fortunate to have not only God, my wife, but some really strong, trusted mentors that have been able to help me walk through some of these big life decisions.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, the grit to make bold transitions, you find the strength in your faith,
Yeah.
in your wife,
Yeah.
and in mentorship relationships.
Yeah, and you could call them advisors.
Yeah, advisors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And what is one piece of advice you feel like has helped you overcome your childhood patterns
Yeah.
of feeling worthless and
Yeah.
depression and having self-esteem issues and
Mhm.
feeling like you need to belong?
Yeah.
What is that overarching theme and or the words and or the feeling even that helps you get over the hump?
Yeah. A few things. One, I would say, if you resonate with my story, have courage to go after healing, which means having really hard conversations, opening up, being vulnerable with people that you trust, getting help, getting counseling. Because if you don't talk about it, if you don't get it in the light, you stay stuck. So I think that for me it was really key. Like, once I really started sharing with the right people these scary, hard, traumatic things that were really keeping me stuck, what I found is when I opened up, it gave me a different perspective. And I realized that while there was maybe some truth in these narratives in my head, it was frankly mostly lies. And I think it took, the community that I was a part of to expose that and hold the mirror up and say, look, like, this is what the mirror is. And the mirror you've been looking at, it's distorted. It's not true. So I think just having the courage to fight hard, to have those honest and courageous conversations. Another two things for me would be forgiveness. Truly forgiving people that had wronged me and choosing forgiveness over bitterness, because I found that bitterness kept me stuck. And for me, bitterness is like this reel going through my mind of like, well, you did this and you did this and you did that, and therefore like you're a bad person, and not choosing to let that go. And it doesn't mean letting those people into your life, but it does mean releasing them. And I've heard that bitterness is swallowing a poison pill and expecting the other person to die. And it only destroys yourself. And so that was another key thing for me to overcome some of the things that were holding me back. And then I would say thankfulness, like reflecting on what is right, what is good in my life, and having this heart of gratitude and gratefulness and remembering and thankfulness. And then finally, one thing that for me has been really helping more recently is comparison, like just squashing comparison. Because growing up with like a have-not mentality, comparing myself to all of these other people that in my mind had it figured out, it really robbed me of a lot of joy. Because the truth is, we're all made very individually, and we're all very different. And when we can embrace our uniqueness and be thankful and not so much worry about like how other people operate or what their skill sets are, or, you know, we can just focus on the way that God made us individually. Again, that's my faith playing out. Then I can be grateful and thankful in how I am and what I'm called to. And I don't need to compare myself to other people that create, you know, an insecurity. And so that's another big thing for me that's been really helpful.
Dude, that's so good to think about. Looking at the right mirror, the mirror that we hold up to ourselves gets distorted by our trauma, by our past, by our pain. Looking at the mirror that our faith, that our family, that our friends who love us and truly know us help us hold up is such a different mirror.
Yeah.
And just understanding that there's distortion, so looking at the right mirror.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, just being able to be, you know, quiet enough to actually see the truth of what's next from your faith, from your hope, from your expectations, is such a critical step, man. Yeah. So you've explained where your grit to make bold transitions comes from, Nate. This has been an exceptional conversation. If you were to give advice to the audience that listens to this podcast, that watches this podcast, if they were to ask you, you know, how in the world can I find the courage in my context to make a bold transition, what would you say?
Yeah. I would say surround yourself with people who give you high challenge and high support that you can trust to start finding small wins that lead to big wins. And what I mean by that is if you can start sharing your limitations instead of hiding, trying to cover them up, act as if they don't exist, and you can find people who will truly not only empathize with you, but challenge you and call the greatness out in you that exists, even though you may not see it because you're blinded, I would encourage you to do that now. Because my wife, again, is a marriage and family therapist, and she works with people who are still stuck in their 60s, in their 70s, wow, because they haven't had the courage to have these conversations, to get healing, to get the right perspective. So the sooner that you can work through that, the sooner you can move on in your life to, you know, to be healthy and whole and to make great impact with your life. And so, you know, I wish I did it sooner. I wish I knew these things at 12, 13, 15. You know, I'm close to 40 now and I'm still learning. But there's hope for you today. It doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. It doesn't matter if you're 70 years old or you're 20 years old. But I would just encourage you to move in that right direction, because once you're free, it unleashes you to go make great, bold moves.
Here's to you, my friend. I hope you find your grit to endure and overcome today. Grit for the Day. Lived experience from influencers who overcome. With CEO and founder Thomas Lee Johnson.